Ethnic Jew slasher review.
You touched on something that I thought was really interesting. I don't want to move too far away from it. I say this with love for Never Hike Alone. I say this with love for Friday the 13th. But I think that it's very interesting that the direction that you decided to take it in was more story focused, because a lot of the reputation that Friday the 13th as a franchise has was not for story. It was not for continuity. So, and I think it's something you did really well, was incorporate that kind of focusing on the characters and the plot. But I am curious as to what it was about Friday the 13th specifically that caught your attention for that kind of a direction.
It was years of arguing with Halloween fans on horror forum, because they could always pull up a card of like, well, at least Halloween, the original, is a good movie. At least it's like got a good script. The story makes sense. Like everything's grounded. You could actually believe that it could happen. Like Jason doesn't even make sense. Why does he even come back? All these things. So for me, it was like, wow, imagine if someone made a Friday the 13th that had as good of a story, or at least was able to stick to its laurels as well as the first Halloween did. Like, what does Friday the 13th look like when it doesn't have those glaring weaknesses of them not paying attention to the clothes that Jason's wearing from one movie to the next, or that he looks completely different, or, you know, they've jumped 3 different states, you know, and had 3 different movies, and they were, you know, New Jersey, Connecticut, then California, and then Atlanta. And like, just what does it look like when you make, not just like, for me, what the fun thing about Never Hike Alone was like, okay, we made the first movie, but now if we're going to make more, let's do what the films never did and actually have the continuity mean something, that literally the same mask is used in every single film. And it survives all 3 movies until we start damaging it at the end. And then we have the, you know, a couple extra hawks made, but we always wanted to bring back those elements. And although we changed little things, and it's funny because it was actually a learning lesson for me as a filmmaker to realize like, okay, this is why things change on movies, because there's so much time that happens in between them, and you get different people and you lose shit, and you realize, you know, the jacket from the first movie was never going to survive to the second movie, and maybe we should use a better material. But it was also the kind of the thing of like, what happens when you ground the story and you hold it to, you know, if you create something in story, don't just go away from it, like have it actually lead to something. And so what had happened to me was that when I started my career in film, I started in feature animation, like feature children's animation, but I was working with people who were at the founding of Pixar, who had worked for Disney. Some people had even worked for Walt Disney. And these were people who were smart storytellers who I got to go to work with every day and learn from. And everything we talked about in animation was about story, character. We talked about the characters, what their arcs were, what their, you know, who are they at the beginning of the movie, who are they at the end of the movie. And my brain just started to sort of latch on to these tools. And so when I was writing scripts, I was, you know, following these rules that I was taught. And when I started writing these Friday the 13th fan films, I started to apply these rules and look at every single character as someone who needed an arc, even Jason. And so I spent a lot of time analyzing, you know, the things that Jason was going through. What type of things would Kyle go through? And we brought Tommy back into the story. Like, where has Tommy been? Why is it taking him so long to get here? And sort of asking the types of questions that fans would ask, and then using that knowledge that I had to be like, let me write these stories as if, you know, I got to present them to producers of Toy Story 2. And I have to pitch them on story that makes sense and is heartfelt and emotional, and, you know, it does these things. And it will be something that Friday the 13th has never done before, because no one expects the story to be good. But if the story is good, imagine how good Friday the 13th could be, because we already love Jason just for being who he is in some of the worst laid plans that you've ever seen for movies ever. And he still overcomes that and captures the minds of people around the world. So let's put him in a situation that is actually going to help elevate him even further. And that was sort of the mission of the first Never Hike Alone, was reintroduce audiences to Friday the 13th with a tone and a viewpoint that I think only people who really love Friday the 13th have. We have that reverence. It's like holy ground to us. Let's go onto the holy ground of Camp Crystal Lake and bring people back to the roots and introduce them to a Jason that would feel like it's capturing the essence of the early films. And he has those humanistic qualities, but at the same time, it's that Jason that we all really grew to love, which is this boy who won't die, this monster that is grown out of the lake and can't be put down, and there's no answer on how to put him down. And let's start building towards those sort of mysteries we've always wanted to know about, and at the same time do our best not to make it feel ham-fisted or make it feel cheesy. And it should, it was really kind of trying to ride that line. And I think that it was a challenge, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun because, as you can tell, I'm passionate about this, and I don't mind spending a lot of time in my own brain or talking to other Friday the 13th fans about the subject, or watching the movies and studying them a little closer and saying, ooh, that's an element I think is a good element of Friday, and I'm going to carry that on.
Right.
Or, you know what, the film doesn't need this. Like, it doesn't need, like, I'm putting this on YouTube. There's no reason why I should put nudity in this movie. There's no reason for anyone to be nude in the movie unless it's Kyle, and then we'll have him shaking his ass around. But at the same time, I don't want to get censored, and I don't want to get, shut down. So
it's not worth all that. Yeah.
And honestly, as a kid, like, I'd watch the movies, like, I'd get in trouble if my mom walked in while watching that scene. Like, that's the only reason why I watched the movie. I was there for Jason. It was like, yeah, yay, boobs. But like, it was never like, oh, I need boobs in the movie. But like, there were some people that we made it, and they were like, where are the boobs? And we're like, what? Like, how old are you?
After all we did, really?
Yeah.
That's what we got. Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah, no. So it was like one of those things where it's like, listen, yeah, I get it. That's like part of horror culture, but at the same time, you weren't paying attention because that wasn't the point of this movie. The point was to do what everybody always talks about, which is make Jason scary again. Well, it's easy to say that, but this is how you do it. And that was the other kind of part of it, was like, when we put Jason in those situations, make him scary, but everything else around it has to feel like a movie that you'd want to watch and want to be with characters and be around them.
Well, where are the boobs? That was my only question.
I was gonna say, I'm so sorry. I was also one of those people in the comments. Where are the
It's fine.
boobs?
You see?
No.
You see what I was talking about?
Yeah. We slipped it in with the Playboy magazine. So that was like our
There you
little
go.
clever
There you
way
go.
of sort of like weaving
Yeah.
it in without like putting too much of us, because I also didn't know if we were going to get off the thing. And, I think once I started seeing some of the things that happened to other fan films on YouTube, I realized that we just got to stay far away from it. And
Yeah.
we don't want to get, we don't want the age restriction. We want people to be able to access. And one of the things I do like about it, and I do meet a lot of younger fans, that parents who are big Friday the 13th fans were like, this is one we can actually show them. And they're the ones who showed us. And now they're interested in Friday the 13th. And now we're connecting through this thing that they found on YouTube. And I'm like, yes, like, it's working. Like, we're getting that next generation like this. So when the franchise does come around, there is a young audience there that hopefully has watched Never Hike Alone, or is like sort of been inspired to be there and sort of be that ground floor for the next, bunch of horror fans that are going to show up to, and anticipate Crystal Lake coming out, eventual movies, games, things like that. So it's just been, I don't know, it's been a lot of hard work, but it's been a lot of fun too.